Welcome to C Word, the Conservators podcast. Today we're talking about new media. I'm Jenny Mathiasson, an Objects Conservator based in Carmarthenshire.
And I'm Kloe Rumsey, an Objects Conservator based in Greater Manchester.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome. Hello.
I don't know why I've taken to slightly sing-songy the first bit. I really apologise.
It's developed over a number of years, that's why.
Yeah, apologies. Today we're going to talk about, I called it like new media in my head and in the spreadsheet.
I've been calling it new media, but I'm not sure how much that actually means, really.
Yeah, no, exactly. So maybe we should think about this as kind of seeing and hearing conservators.
Oh, yes.
As opposed to reading them. So, anyway, to explore this topic, we've got a special guest host with us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I am Lucy Branch and I am a sculptural and architectural features conservator specialising in bronze. And it's a really good job that you didn't call it new media when you asked me to come along, because I don't think I'd have understood that. I might have said no.
It's a wish-washy thing, isn't it? But hello and welcome. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much. I've been listening to the show for ages and ages. Yeah, it's great to be able to join you guys.
It's lovely to have you.
And, I mean, one of your superpowers is that you are also a podcaster.
Although I haven't got 9 seasons under my belt as yet.
The key word there is yet.
Yeah, exactly.
I host a podcast called Sculpture Vulture. It's such fun. Part of my work is dealing with sculptors, and I always have these fantastic conversations with them. And I always think, I wish somebody had recorded that. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it.
You know, we talked about this kind of in the contemporary art episode, that I hadn't realised how much collaboration you can do with artists, because I don't really work on like living artists things. That isn't usually a thing that I do. So there's this beautiful dialogue between, you know, artists and conservators that I was just not privy to. And this is kind of like being privy to that. And it's just like, oh, it's beautiful. I love it. And yeah, it
kind of is. I mean, if you get the nice ones that are really helpful, and then you get the other ones that you get some and you're like, right, so we're going to be doing some conservation work on your sculpture. And they say, yeah, I've decided I made it the wrong colour. I've decided I want to make it red. You're like,
no.
and then they won't talk to you because, you know, they're sort of, they won't talk to you because you don't want to change it to red.
Wow.
So I haven't had any of those ones on. I have disinvited them.
Oh, I feel like maybe everyone can relate to, let's say, clients or colleagues like that, though, where it's like, could you just... No, that's
could you change it entirely, please? No, I can't.
Could you make it look really new? No.
It was such a brilliant thing for CPD as well, because that's always been such a great love of mine as professional development, carrying on learning. And the thing is that if you don't have something that you have to come to like a deadline with. So I know there's going to be an interview coming up. So I get to do research on, you know, people that I may not necessarily work with and things like that. And that was one of my CPD goals years ago. And I was thinking, you know, I'm just not getting there. I'm not actually making this happen. So in a sense, the podcast, as much as it's fantastic to share it with the world, has also been this great thing because it's made me do something that I did want to do, but it just was never urgent. So it never happened.
That's a really good way of thinking about it. I really like that.
It's definitely worked for me, although, you know, fitting it in around normal conservation practice and things like that has its challenges.
We've had a few moments like that, haven't we, Jenny, where we've just thought, this is that I can't just, what are we doing? Yeah. How do we make this work?
I think you and I, Kloe, at least we can rely on each other a little bit, where it's like, oh God, I just can't. Can you help? And like we prop each other up.
I'm kind of envious that you can share your podcasting with someone. You guys have got a lovely collaboration. And the thing is that actually being I run my own company, but it's a family business and it's a little bit of an island. When I go into institutions and I see how many people there are with similar interests, and maybe they're not exactly what you do, but there's something, wonderful to be able to have a wider group that you can share that with. And that's something maybe in independent practice you get less of. And so in a way, you know, the podcasting as well kind of gives me that. But it would be nice to be able to share it. The work, at least.
But it is notable that podcasting is totally something you can do on your own. It doesn't have to be a team sport. It is fun if it is, but it doesn't have to be. Because I'm thinking of there are loads of good solo podcasts, and I know there's the Future Conservators podcast, which just started, which is run by a student.
I need to listen to that.
I'm very glad that there are more conservators podcasting. That is now a thing that we can see, and it's not just a conservator featured on a podcast, or like it's not a one-off. Like, you know, people are dedicating time to it, and I'm super pleased to see it. And by the way, do let us know if there are more ones out there.
Yes, please.
I'm really pleased to see that people are using the medium, because it doesn't have to be expensive. It does take time. That is, of course, a thing that we know. A little bit in the preamble to this episode, which you guys don't get to hear, we kind of talked about podcasting as being a body of work, which I thought was a really nice point that you brought up, Lucy.
Well, I think that, you know, you look at your CV and you look at maybe the things you've worked on, but it is another form when you curate your notes, or when you have your audio files all in one place and you see it all together. And, you know, it may not necessarily be that part of the work may not be an income stream per se, but I do count it as my body of work. And it's not so easy to sort of reference in other ways, but it's one of the things that makes it an incredibly satisfying means of putting your time into something, because it's there and it's there forever, what one would hope, but certainly there for the long term.
So could you describe a typical episode for us, please, for the listeners?
So my episodes are interview-based generally, and this is something that I'm going to take some risk with next season and maybe mix it up a bit. But I know, basically they are interviews, about half-hour interviews with a sculptor who is working and displaying in public spaces. And I love large objects. That's my thing. I work in bronze, and the majority of what we do is large. So I'm not just interested in like sort of that kind of question of, you know, what does your work mean? It's more actually about a lot about creativity and working as what I would call a creative, which I count conservation as. And I know that we're not maybe, you know, we're not poets necessarily, but I feel like there is a huge amount of creativity. And when you think about the kind of icon standards about how we're supposed to reflect on our work and how we're supposed to, you know, think laterally and critically, and this kind of concepts are all things that are in creative businesses. So I want to know from them, like, how they stimulate their work, where they're getting their ideas from, what the highs and lows of that work is. So at the end, after I've had a chat with them, I kind of do a little bit of a roundup as a conclusion, kind of reflecting on some of the things they say, because some of them say things which are so relevant to, you know, any creative business, but particularly if you're maybe an independent company. That was kind of, I suppose that was my interest. So that's why I've kind of gone in that direction. The great thing about ending a season is you can ask your audience, like, what do you want to know more about? And guess what they all want to know more about? Conservation.
Yes.
What protective coatings should we be recommending for our sculptures? What kind of issues? Oh, I found this issue on my sculpture, and I'm sure it's relevant to other people. And I suddenly thought, why am I not talking about conservation? So next season there's going to be a segment in many of the episodes about sculptural conservation, because my audience tends, you know, they've got a direct investment in their sculptures. They want to know what to recommend their clients, and so that was really obvious. I don't know why it didn't hit me before.
No, that's super interesting. I mean, it's always interesting seeing why people listen, and also kind of how much knowledge they want shared and how much knowledge you want shared. Like that's a balance to strike, and I think that's a really beautiful thing, actually.
Yeah, but I don't know, it's an obvious thing, because talking about media, I run an online course, and mostly for my clients. So the kind of people that come to me that need their sculptures looking after, they have these huge responsibilities. Some of them are looking after enormous collections, and they have no conservation knowledge at all because they come from local authorities, or they may be more of a business kind of mind, or facilities managers. And so I created the course for them. And so actually, me teaching sculptors who are also not conservation trained about what to recommend for their sculpture, it's a real no-brainer. I should have thought of it, but but the penny did drop eventually.
It sounds like it would be interesting for conservators who are generalists as well, though, because I'm thinking, well, I wouldn't know what to do with quite a lot of sort of sculptural things, and though I consider myself an objects conservator, whenever it's inorganic, I do have to look things up. So I wonder if sometimes it can be rare for conservators to be sort of interested in the origin of the artwork and the creative process of the artist. So having a podcast segment of, and this is now information that a conservator can physically take away for their, daily practice. It sounds like a great way of encouraging people to be more sort of interested in the whole piece, if that's what you're offering.
Yeah, and I think that one of the fantastic things about different mediums that we are able to work in these days as conservators is it's so much easier to provide information. Like, I would be daunted to try and sit down and write a very academic text, but I can chat about it, and I know that my information's useful. It may not be publication worthy always, but there's something to say there. And I think being able to get it out there into the world, it's useful to people. So I don't know, you're doing a little bit of good in the world.
I feel like that's something that's really come up for me personally in my career, and during podcasting, that it's not everything needs to be as big a deal as an academic article. And a lot of what I'm reading about when I want to find something out, like advice on how to do this or how to do that, I will read an academic article because that's often where some of the information is. But just a sort of description and photographs and, a chat essentially about the process would be just as useful, if not more useful to me. And then what we've been aiming for our podcast is essentially just, this is information that's useful to people and interesting to people, but it's way not academic necessarily.
These new forms of media that we have got available to us means that I feel like conservators spend a lot of their time sort of exchanging their time for money, which I know everyone does, but what I mean is it's quite per hour sort of work. Whereas I really like the idea of moving towards this thing where this idea that you can do something once and you can get paid for it forever. And I know that it's not all about money, but I have spent hours and hours and hours on phones to clients, talking to them about their particular bronze problem. And I feel like, you know what? There is a huge audience out there that's probably got exactly the same problem. And while I've spent that time speaking to that one person, I could have helped 500 people. And so there's this idea that we can evolve towards a slightly different model, I think, for conservation and for CPD, but also for earning money.
So far we've been talking about kind of hearing conservators, but seeing conservators, that's also a big deal. So as people may or may not know, I'm a massive fan of YouTube, and I found myself a YouTubing conservator to talk to.
Hello everyone, my name is Lucilla Ronai, but I go by Lucy. And you can probably tell from my accent, I'm from Australia. I'm a conservator here. I specialise in paper, but I also love working with books. And I'm really passionate about conservation communication, so I'm pretty excited to be on the show. And I currently work at the Australian National Maritime Museum, but in about 3 weeks, I'll be starting a new job at the National Library of Australia.
Oh, that's very exciting. Congratulations. So, for those who aren't familiar with your YouTube channel, could you describe the kind of content that you produce there?
Well, it's called The Conservation Starter, so I'm trying to be very funny. It's all about conservation, as you might guess from the title, and I'm trying to feature videos that show the behind the scenes of being a conservator, share some tips and tricks, and I'm trying to find the balance between having the general public as an audience and getting them to know what conservation is, but also hopefully providing some content for other conservators that they're interested in as well.
What made you want to use that platform in particular?
So there's kind of a few reasons. First of all, as you know, conservation isn't really a known of profession in the mainstream. So I've often had to be at a party and tell people that I'm a conservator and then promptly seeing their blank expressions explain what a conservator is. So I guess it was trying to put the profession a bit more out there, especially because I found that there were some other great conservation YouTube channels, but there's not many. And also there are some great YouTube videos about conservation, but usually they're hidden amongst other videos on like a museum's YouTube page. And so main point was to get conservation out there. Also, I love talking about conservation, so that was definitely a reason why. And also, YouTube is the second biggest search engine in the world, second only to Google. So in terms of, and not many people know this. So in terms of searching for conservation and what it is and search engine optimization, all that kind of stuff, YouTube is huge for that. It's a really powerful algorithm. And you might have found that if you're Googling terms these days, videos are actually showing up in the first page. So it seems like they're actually prioritizing video content when people are searching for answers for things. So I thought that was really cool to try and investigate all that. Aside from conservation not really being known about, there's also often sort of a misrepresentation of conservation, or not necessarily even conservation, but there's some pretty extreme restoration videos of people doing things at home with historic objects that are a bit alarming and a bit in your face. So I was just like, oh, it would be nice to show people that there are other alternatives to completely, stripping back metal artifacts and things like that. So yeah, there's kind of a combination of all those things was why I wanted to do it.
That's a good mission statement. I like it. It's a good point there about it being a big search engine. I guess I don't really think about it that way, but you're completely right. And, whenever I Google anything, it always suggests videos first. So that's actually a very good point. I like it.
Yeah, and it's actually getting even more and more powerful because now as you're searching for things, they're actually positioning the video at the right timestamp. So instead of watching the whole video when it shows up on the Google page, you can actually just start playing it from the search page result and it will start playing from the exact moment when it should answer your question, essentially. It's pretty amazing.
Wow. What's been the trickiest thing about vlogging, as it's also known?
Oh, okay. I guess the main problem was when I decided to do a YouTube channel, I didn't actually know how to do any filming or editing. So that was a very steep learning curve. So I luckily had a very good friend who was kind of an expert on all those things. Actually, have you ever heard of Museum Dance-Off?
You know what? Yeah, that rings a bell. I think we mentioned it on the show way back when, but yes.
Okay, it happened years ago. It ran for 5 years. Basically, it was an international dance competition where you entered by video submission and institutions around the world could just submit a video. And the idea was just show your museum, show your staff, show your collection, do whatever you want, be a bit creative, be a bit fun. And so the Maritime Museum actually did an entry in the last year they ran it. So it was myself and my friend Kate, we did it together. So I danced. So I brought the choreography and the music, and I was the one yelling out 5, 6, 7, 8. And she brought all the technological know-how and she directed and did all the filming and all the editing. So basically I watched her do that process. And then a few years later when I decided to do YouTube, I pretty much learnt from her. And yeah, so she taught me a lot. So that was one of the big issues. Didn't know how to film or edit. So that's something I'm still working on. And then I guess another big challenge is I've really tried to find a fine balance on what is okay to show, what I should show in videos and what I should say and what I shouldn't. I guess there is a risk with conservation of maybe showing too much or maybe showing things that people might not quite understand. So if I do show things, I'm trying to give a lot of context, but I'm really not trying to do this is a do it yourself conservation treatment at home and this is all the steps you need to do and these are exactly the materials and equipment you need. And I'm trying to work out exactly why I'm reluctant to do that. But I think maybe as a conservator, you understand because, some of the treatments we do are quite risky, especially in terms of the cultural heritage. And, we do all the analysis and testing and examination. And often when we're creating a video or we're creating content from social media, we try and include that context, but often people don't find it as interesting and they just skip through to the amazing treatment and don't maybe see all that important information and skills and knowledge. So I think that's a bit of that involved. And also, we use chemicals and sharp tools and machinery. So there is a risk to people as well. So yeah, I'm trying to find that balance. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges. Yeah. Also, people with videos that you put out on YouTube, they do interact with them. Often people will comment on the videos on YouTube itself, or they'll reach out on other social media platforms. And the amount of times I've had to sort of say, oh, this is not something I recommend doing at home. And I can give you really great resources on how to handle or store or display your objects, or I can give you contact details for private conservators. And yeah, people receive it in varying degrees. Some people are very happy and go, oh yes, no, of course we understand. And some people got quite rashy that I wouldn't just tell them step by step how to do it. And they don't seem to realize that I'm also doing it all in my own spare time as well. So I have to sort of draw a line at some point where I'm just like, yes, I'll give you some information, but I'm not gonna treat your object for you, I'm afraid.
Flipping it on its head here, so if that's the tricky bit, what has been the best thing about making these YouTube videos?
Oh, I have to say the connections I've gotten through it. People just reach out to you, and it's amazing the contact I've had with people, and it's been so well received. So yeah, conservators are watching the videos, which I'm super happy and proud that the conservation world thinks the videos are good, because ultimately I do want conservators to watch them, but yeah, I think my audience is tending towards the general public, so that's really amazing. So yeah, the conversations I've had as a result from the videos has probably been the highlight, and also feeling like it's getting conservation out there more. There's been a lot of people interested in studying conservation, or people that are currently students reaching out as well. So I feel like the videos are sort of helping inspire people to be conservators as well. So that's pretty amazing.
Do you have any advice for any conservators out there who might want to give YouTube a go?
Definitely. I say start and do it. You do not need to have all the amazing equipment and tools and even really editing knowledge, because there are so many resources out there for you to learn. There's actually whole YouTube channels dedicated to how to create a YouTube channel and create YouTube videos. And then phones these days are just so fantastic. And there are, again, YouTube videos showing you how to create videos on your phone. So I think the main barrier is probably just sitting down and making a video. And one thing I will say is, if you do want to create video content, YouTube isn't the only platform you can use. There are so many other ones that you can share your videos in. And I just think conservation is such a visual profession, and I think it lends itself really well to videos. So yeah, I just encourage everyone to have a go, and try it with whatever equipment you have access to. And also in conservation labs, we often have quite good camera equipment or even lights, so you could see if you can do it in a professional setting as well, and maybe borrow the equipment you have access to.
That's lovely. Thank you so much for talking to the C Word today, Lucy.
It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I was so impressed. I didn't know about her, and I listened to the thing, and then I watched some videos, and I love her. I think she's wonderful.
They're good. They
are excellent. But the only thing is that it struck me how you have to find your media that you're comfortable with. And for me, audio, I love it. I love audio. But I just couldn't be on a screen. I don't know what happens with the Wicked Witch of the West. Doesn't she sort of dissolve? I think that would happen to me on screen. So yeah, she's absolutely brilliant, and she's really found her thing.
Yeah, definitely. And it's so sort of artistic as well, the way she puts them together.
I love the whole aesthetic. It's great.
Absolutely. It's just really nice and well balanced, and the use of before and after and the use of time lapse is just really, really lovely. I was very impressed.
And I think that she is managing to hit a different audience on that platform. You really see that the different platforms are offering different audiences different things, and so people gravitate to what they're interested in. And so, you're saying a really huge YouTube fan. Well, that would be your default to go to. For me, I would go towards podcasts. But that's why you're reaching different audiences in these ways. That's what conservators definitely need to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I liked a bit about us being a very visual profession, because that's a really good point. So I actually, a lot of what we do lends itself really nicely to video work. And it's, sometimes we can be a bit scared about that, or sometimes we might see people do it and we don't agree with how it's done. And, that's fair enough. I mean, that happens in anything. I mean, I'm sure there are people who don't like this, and, that's also fine.
Yeah, I think that's a really big issue for conservators as well, because people can be incredibly critical with, the approach to different things. And I think that that's a huge fear, pulling people back from talking about conservation, that thing of, I don't want to be criticised, or I don't want my institution to be criticised, or I don't want... And the reality is there's never just one way to do something.
Yeah.
But we are still, I think, hampered by that fear.
Not only that, but also kind of hampered by the kind of old way of thinking about things, that, everything has to be really academic, or it has to be really serious, or nobody will take you seriously if you do a reaction video. It has to be an academic article about the properties of a particular adhesive under particular conditions. No, that is not the only way to do things. And we've talked about that before in in our publishing episode, for example, and being on social media and all of that stuff. Like there isn't just one way to do things. And we need to explore different things because we need to stay relevant. Like it's all very nice to think that, this is how we used to do things, so it's how we'll always do things. No.
Yeah.
I think maybe there'll always be a time and a place for academic articles, etc. But that's not to say that there isn't a place for blogging and vlogging and podcasts and all sorts of ways of sharing what we do and why we're passionate about it. Otherwise, people don't know that conservators exist. We stop getting funding and we cease to exist. Does anyone want that? No, not really.
I do think as well that YouTube is a particularly good platform because of not just the nature of the other videos that are on there and the other sort of platform users and watchers, I should say, but also because it's so extremely versatile that you can have things that are just, most of her videos were about 10 minutes long. You can have much longer ones and people will still sit through them. You can have much shorter ones and you can really describe what you're doing or not, depending on the style of the video. And I was very impressed with her use of it, but I'm quite inspired by the potential, really. I have to say, I say inspired. I'm not going to do it because I feel exactly the same way as you do, Lucy, about speaking in front of a camera and being in front of camera generally. It's not for me.
But speaking of video, by the way, something that I asked about on social media was if there were any conservators on TikTok, because I know I don't actually use the platform myself at this point, but might do. I know of archaeologists and historians and heritage people who do use it very successfully. So I was just curious if conservators are doing anything similar. And by the way, if you are a conservator on TikTok, please let me know because that sounds amazing. And this kind of spurred you to do an experiment.
It did. So actually, I am, as we speak, doing a video. Let me just time lapse. Okay, I am doing a video now to put onto TikTok. So I saw on Twitter Jenny saying, anyone on TikTok? And one woman in the US saying, me! And that's basically it, really. A number of people saying, yes, but I'm furloughed at the moment because pandemic. So there isn't really, I'm not doing much conservation at the moment, so it's not on there. So I thought, I'm going to try it. And see, as the podcast, as it were, obviously as me, but as the podcast, and see what it's about. I've not used it before. I sort of felt a bit meh about the platform. So I've done some audio recording, and created this TikTok account. And that's where my I don't like being on video has come from.
You can spend an awful lot of time on different platforms. And you have to be really careful. You want people on that platform that are going to be open to what you're talking about. Otherwise, it's a huge time suck. And so it's a kind of a balance to work out which ones are worth your time.
And essentially it is, if you're not familiar with the platform TikTok, it's for creating really short videos, and people use it for I've seen some great museum uses with curators saying, this is 5 seconds of this information about this object. That's really entertaining. But a lot of it is kind of, what I'm saying is there is serious stuff to it, and people talk a lot about it, and the heritage and conservation videos that there are is a lot of time-lapse stuff. And so Huckabuck Girl on TikTok, she's really good. She's an objects conservator in the US, and she does all sorts of subjects. So it's a TikTok about her life, essentially. I mean, she may describe it differently, so I'm sorry if that's wrong. But she does some objects conservation stuff and, political stuff. And that seems to work really well. She's got loads of views and followers and stuff. When I found that... Firstly, I think it's safe to say that I haven't got the platform yet, because I've only just been using it for 5 days. And a lot of it seems to be like TikTok in-jokes. So I thought, well, this would be a great way of sharing, as we sometimes do as the podcast, conservation in-jokes of always a pain in the ass when there's loads of spiders in the pest trap and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that there are enough conservation users necessarily to share those in-jokes. So I started during the process sharing, this is some information about broomstick, that kind of thing. Like, this is a little bit of information in a time-lapse video. But I don't know really how interactive or how teaching or how necessarily interesting it would be, because what we're doing when we're using new media in conservation is trying to advocate for our profession, communicate, teach, educate, and it depends so much on what the reason for people using a social media platform like TikTok or Instagram or YouTube. YouTube is for learning a lot of the time, whether it's yoga or, farming in the UK. It's a lot of the time for learning, but I don't think TikTok is, and I don't know whether it could be adapted or whether it's just not its place. I'm not sure.
I mean, there's something to be said for something just being entertaining as well. There's...
Absolutely.
Maybe we lean too heavily on just, we need to be teaching people something. Maybe the thing that we can just teach people is that we exist. And not in that kind of this is what conservators, but more about, this is something you can even go and Google now. You didn't know this existed. Maybe sometimes that's enough of a takeaway. Like, I wonder who these funny people in lab coats and aprons are. Like, maybe sometimes that's enough,
Whenever I talked about it with Tom, he describes it as 14-year-old American kids dancing.
Yeah.
And I know it's not just that, but there's an awful lot of that kind of content. Right, so I just had this bright idea to do a C Word podcast TikTok account. I saw the explosion of TikTok as a thing last year, and I thought, nah, it's not for me. I thought that about Instagram as well, and that is for me. So maybe I'll change my mind. But it's a visual media, and all other visual medias work really well for conservation, so we shall see. So I've signed in, and it's asking me to choose my interests. Comedy, sports, no, not gaming, not beauty, daily life, oddly satisfying. Is this for me or for other people? Art. Next. Videos are personally based on what you want. Okay. Oh, so it's talking to me about using it, and I'm going to be one of those annoying people that just puts content out and doesn't use. This is just an experiment, though, for now. Start what? Okay, so I can't play TikTok and record at the same time. So it then went on to all of the instant play videos in the world, and then I found me and create content. So I'm going to go back into the studio now and try and think of some content to create. And I'm not really sure because I've not ever watched TikTok really, apart from belly dances on Instagram. We'll see. I might do a bit of research on conservation and see what other kind of heritage stuff there is out there and see if there's a format, but we'll see. Okay, so I'm not really finding much in the way of conservation by searching conservation. I've got a bit more luck searching hashtags, but the hashtag restorer or textile restoration. So I'm going to explore a bit more with that. Maybe art restorer, art conservation. There's loads of museum stuff. Black Country Museum account is really fun, and there's loads of curators talking about particular objects, like histories of objects. So communication and teaching is a big way of communicating museums. The best ones seem to be the ones that are really fun and really visual and take quite a lot of time to do, so I don't know that I have that time. So I'm going to try images of conservation and cool music over the top, because that seems to also be a thing. It's going to be interesting to see how people find us and stuff. So I ran out of time at work. I was a bit busy. I ran out of time to do a post at work today, so I'm just going to post some of the videos that I've taken in the past today and tomorrow. First observation: it takes a lot of time to do these things. It seems more like kind of creating a YouTube video and then putting it on just a different format, rather than how I see Instagram stories, which is more like, this is a video of what I'm doing with an emoji on it, you know? So what I did was obviously whinge that I didn't have any views. So I went through and followed as many people as I found that seemed to post relevant things, following the hashtags. So I just had a very interesting conversation about TikTok with partner Tom, who is surprisingly up to date with all of this. And firstly, he said some things which made me feel a bit seen, along the lines of, is this really a media that you can utilise as a person and as a person within my community, being, as he described, too cardigan wearing, given the media, the sort of general users of TikTok. But we need to communicate in different ways with different people. You know, what's better than and communicating with a totally different audience of very young people all over the world, blah, blah, blah. And the other thing he said that was really interesting was, it's not really a media that one can interact with very easily. I wonder if something along those lines means that Twitter, for example, lends itself really well to interacting and communicating about conservation, whereas TikTok and maybe Instagram doesn't so much, because it's very much, this is what I have done, but you can't really share quite so easily. We'll be talking about this, but I have some, questions about what's required of a media to be involved in for conservation. But the main thing that came out of what Tom was saying was, you can't really do it properly if you don't consume it yourself. So me trying to create engaging and TikTok-y like media is pretty ambitious, considering I've never looked at it, but it seems very much, this is the meme to do, and this is the in-joke, essentially. I've tried to take Tom's advice with using known TikTok memes. So I had a cool video of myself and my colleague raising a banner, Amalgamated Society of Watermen and Lightermen. Why not the Wellerman Sea Shanty song? So I put that on, and I thought it would look quite good. I don't know if anyone's going to get the joke, but they might, you never know. Right, day 2, TikTok. What have we got? So I am on 506 views on the first video I did, the one I shared to Twitter. Only 9 views for the little mini video, and 362 views on the Wellerman meme song on it. I don't know why it's more popular than the other one. Maybe because it's got I don't know, are they searched by the song that's on there? Or maybe it's because it's a kind of dynamic looking big object moving video? I'm not sure. Okay. As an experiment, I've just changed my TikTok bio to add, as well as the Conservators podcast, adding Ask Me About Museum and Heritage Conservation. So I don't know what's going on with why some videos are watched and some videos aren't. The video that I posted earlier, had no music at all, and it's got 300 plus watches. And I don't understand why, if it's not music or video length. But I've also changed tactics slightly, that I've sort of struggled to find much of a conservation community I've decided to change the attitude of my posts to being less just this is an in-joke about conservation and more this is what we do in conservation without sort of assuming knowledge. So it's day 3. God, it's been a long week. And I'm still going with TikTok. The interest is waning a little. I was supposed to do some videoing when I was in the studio today, because that was the whole point. But I just found it very time consuming to even set up. And then I needed access to something, so I was sitting on the table and I thought, oh, is that unprofessional? Probably. And I was doing a very, very long line of stitching. And when I say very long, I mean like 3.5 meters of stitching. And I thought, well, even sped up, that isn't going to be super interesting to watch. I've got plenty of other things to post, but the idea was to post something of what I was doing at the moment. Okay, I just listened back to the last little bit of recording and I think I was very tired that day. Since we had our chat during recording, I was very inspired, as I said during the recording, by the YouTuber. And I think that I do, though it doesn't sound it, I do like TikTok as a form of communicating conservation. But I think I just need to let go of the idea that people need to be interested in the same way that we're interested, because people will be interested. I do think it's still very positive, and it is quite fun. I think I'm going to keep going with it. But the thing that's occurred to me most is that it is so time consuming. And with what Lucy was saying about her YouTubing, you just have to decide to put the time in. And I don't know whether personally I can be bothered, because even on my own social media, even if it's just posting a video of my cat on my Instagram stories, sometimes I just can't be bothered to put the time into making sure I've spelt the, captions right. So it might be that I just don't personally have the patience with social media very much. So I'm going to keep it going as my stupid, dumbass conservation humour outlet and just make sure Jenny doesn't mind. TikTok, do I like it? Do I not like it? The big mainstream where people are earning loads of money from it is a very different beast to what people can get from it for their other interests and non-viral content. And I'm just going to keep posting, and hopefully that will encourage other conservators to post about what they do. So, thumbs up. The reason we came up with this idea for an episode topic when we were planning out the season was because we're sitting in the middle of a pandemic. And I had the sort of feeling that conservators were sort of... I don't know that this is connected. I don't think it's affected by what conservators want to do, because we always want to branch out into creating more media. But possibly the idea that whilst we're sort of sitting furloughed at home on the sofa, as I've spent the last 12 months doing, I have more of an appetite essentially for watching conservation videos online in whatever respect, or interacting on Twitter, because I feel so sort of out of touch and in need of, some kind of contact with my field. And I wonder if anyone has any thoughts about that, in terms of not necessarily using social media as a way of learning, but feeling connected.
But that's what COVID, hasn't it? It's really opened us to new media. It's made us use all these platforms that, as much as we all might have used Teams or Zoom occasionally, now we're using them all the time. And so if nothing else has come out of this pandemic, it has made us explore these other options and say, for social distancing reason, I am on my own. And, where can I get advice and help from? I think that's got to be one of the few things that's come out of all this.
Yeah, absolutely. So since we're talking about seeing and hearing conservatives, I thought we would be amiss to not mention the more old school approach of TV and radio. I don't know if any of you have had to be on the radio, but I don't enjoy being on the radio, even though I like audio. But I think it's possible because I'm not in control and I do ramble a lot. And I feel like, especially if it's like ad-libbing and kind of like they're just going to ask me any old question, I kind of panic and start babbling. And not a good choice for the radio, guys. But I have had to, when we've just had radio people wandering around a museum, and, you know, it's been a case of, okay, just make polite conversation when they come to you. And it's like, okay. I distinctly remember being thrilled to talk about conservation and then being in my lab. And then they asked me a very specific question about something on the bench, and I completely panicked and went, I don't actually know what kind of bird that is because I've completely forgotten. I was just like, oh, drop the ball.
It's the not edited thing that I cannot stand. I don't like it at all.
Yeah.
But I dance in public, live, all the time. I used to before the pandemic. So what's the problem with that?
You rehearse that, don't you? Like you...
No.
No,
I don't. I turn up in a restaurant in my costume, and people put some music on for me, and then I just dance about. There's no plan.
Okay, fair enough then.
But why am I fine with that? But I'm not fine with anything unedited.
But I think it's ingrained in you, the dance moves, the music. It's ingrained in you. So it's some kind of muscle memory. So
yeah,
really
that yeah. But stuff goes wrong, and I'm not bothered.
Going back to radio, I think there's, radio is, because it sort of has slightly more of a gatekeeper feeling to it. It's kind of quite traditional in format. But I do think it offers a lot of opportunities to conservators that we don't necessarily use. So
yeah,
I've had dabbled in this because another thing that I do is write. And I write novels, and one of the things I found is that because I was hoping to promote my book, and I approached the media with, discussions about the book to try and get the name out there, they jumped at the conservation. That was what they were interested in. And so actually I got interview after interview, and actually ended up not even mentioning the books. And they loved it. And actually, if I had more time to have sort of, approached more, I think, the radio shows are looking for content just like everyone else. And I think somehow we're a bit more afraid of approaching that slightly more traditional form of media. But actually, they are looking for it. They really are. So I encourage conservators to not think just about new media, but also about old media.
That's so cool.
We are trying to talk about seeing and hearing conservators, so those totally count. So I think that's great. I thought we'd just finish today with talking about conservators on TV, because that's not super common, but It does happen. And something that's quite popular on TV is The Repair Shop. They have loads of seasons, and I've been watching them all.
How are they? I haven't watched any. Oh, I watched a bit, and I was kind of and then I had to stop. Not because I hated it. I have to say, not because I hated it.
Yeah, I think my initial reaction was like, oh, they're in a barn. Oh, I wonder how drafty that is. I wonder if they have pets. And initially just immediately leaning into this kind of conservative mindset of being like, oh, I wonder how they handle this and that. But that's all background details. I just need to disconnect that and enjoy the journey. But we should say that The Repair Shop, it is a mixture of conservators and craftspeople. There is a heavy emphasis on restoration, not conservation, but that doesn't necessarily detract from it. I feel like it is a great celebration of skills and also the values that we try to look after. What's important about this? Can you tell me about the history of it? But not just in a kind of, this was my grandpa's and I really love my grandpa. Obviously you do, but in the kind of sense of, oh, well, these scuffs are really important because that's the science of its life, that's the use, or this is my teddy bear, I gnawed its ear off when I was 3, I don't actually want the ear replaced. It's all of these things, what's important about this? What is it you want this to be? And those are the sorts of conversations that we either have or should have with anyone who approaches us to do anything, whether that's, in-house or commercially. And notably, the people on the show that are conservators do highlight the things of, for example, okay, so in conservation, we wouldn't do this. I'm doing this because, or there's tantalizing glimpses of, and in conservation, this is something that we do, and they don't show the whole process, but they show a little bit, and enough to kind of convey expertise and specialism. And I guess I quite like that. Maybe the balance isn't quite right for my tastes. I'm a conservative, right? So I'm always going to fret about, what are you doing to that? But there are restorers in this workshop. That's kind of the thing, you know, like it's a mixture of craftspeople and conservators. So it's never going to be purely one thing.
You've got this sort of narrative of everything going perfectly, which I keep noticing. So there's no like, oh, that hasn't worked, or which that's again, it's like sort of perpetuating this myth that none of us make any mistake.
Yeah.
There is a kind of rosy glow over it, over the treatments.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, we got to remember that this is broadcast TV, so there is that. I think it is a good show. Genuinely, I think it is good, and I think it is raising awareness of skills, you know, and the fact that experts exist. It does really highlight that we need people who are good at these things.
I'm Lucia Scalisi, and I'm a conservator of easel paintings. And I also appear on the Repair Shop as we're called experts, as the expert paintings conservator. And I'm the only one that they call a conservator because I asked to be called a conservator as opposed to a restorer. So that's me.
Do you want to tell us a bit about your background?
Yeah, I trained a long time ago in Newcastle on their conservation of easel paintings course. I actually trained when it was at Gateshead Technical, and the Tech College has beautiful grounds and it had a beautiful Victorian house there. Did 2 years there, and before I finished, or at the end of my second year, I got a contract at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. So I literally packed up my gear at the end of term, drove it all to my long-suffering parents, and carried on down to London and shared a flat for a week whilst I looked for accommodation. And yeah, that was straight away. So I worked at the V&A for 12 years. And then I left, and it was a good time because I'd been working on a project in India. The V&A had seconded me to this fantastic project in Calcutta. And ultimately, I ended up working on the project through the seasons for about 15 years. We usually went out in the winter season because that was the coolest weather. It's way too hot to work on paintings. They just become so floppy and unhappy in the heat and humidity, as do the conservators. So that was my leap from training to the Victoria and Albert Museum and then into private practice, which is what I still do now.
Wow. How did you get to be involved with the Repair Shop?
Okay, so from the early 2000s until about 2010, I was also doing some teaching at the Conservation Studies course at London City and Guilds in Kennington. I can't remember exactly, but say around 2010. It was a private view. They have private views, you know, at the end of years for the MA students and what have you, and also within the art school. And I was down there for the private view one evening, and there was a lady there, and she had a TV camera. So I was chatting to her, and she said, "Oh yeah, I'm here because I'm working for some company, and we're looking to do something on conservation." So we sat down and we had a glass of wine because it was a private view evening, and we just chatted. And then the next day, the TV company contacted me and offered me this pilot program that they were doing. And so, long story short, I did that over one summer, and then it went out actually quite a long time afterwards. It went out on BBC Two. It was called the Restoration Roadshow. And it was actually quite well received. But the premise for that programme was they have a bunch of conservators, or mostly restorers actually, because there were a lot of furniture people and some clock people and some ceramicists and things. The premise was that they get people to bring their objects in, then they get conserved. So I did the paintings, and then they take them to auction and sell them. And I said, you know what, guys, it doesn't work like that. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
Any work I do does not make the object more valuable. It makes it better to handle and to look at maybe. It's not going to be any more valuable than when it was brought in. So that was a hard lesson for them, because obviously the auctioning side of things did not work as part of the remit. And one of the directors that was on that programme cut through to 2016 actually. He worked for another production company, and they came up with the Repair Shop, which was a completely different premise. No money involved at all in terms of values of objects or whatever. It worked, and that's what you see on the Repair Shop. So regardless of any monetary value, the value is the story, really. That's why it works, and it relates to every single person everywhere. We did the first programme in January 2017. So this is its 5th year. It's slowly sort of changing. I mean, lots of really fantastic experts from so many different fields come in. You know, we've had, for example, coopers, you know, that make the barrels in. We've recently had a person who's a proper cobbler. I can't tell you what he was doing, but that will come out on a program later this year. So, and obviously so many different musical instruments, you know, from the Indian sitar and, you know, European instrument. I mean, it's just fantastic. And clocks that you wouldn't believe. It's making people also think about their connection to their past and their history, and actually, you know, seeking out the stuff that's been at the bottom of the cupboard or in the loft for the last 50 years because they considered it broken and they couldn't do anything with it. My desire would be that it really encourages people to look outwards, to actually look for people that can conserve whatever it is that they've got.
Do you have a favourite thing that you've worked on as part of the show?
Well, I tend to like most of the things I work on, but there's something coming. I'm not promoting it, but I'm going to promote it by talking about it. But on Wednesday next week, the 21st, it's the part of a whole new series of objects are coming out, and mine is the prime slot one, because it's so important and so interesting. And it was a real find, and it's a painting, obviously. And so when that came in, I knew at 10 paces, and I thought, oh my word, this is a find. And the funny thing is that you know it as a conservator, you know, you recognize sort of details in it that are sort of giveaways, and I could tell, but nobody else can see it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think the one that's coming out next week is really special. I mean, I've loved all the paintings I've done, and they've all had different stories to tell. I think for me, the stories, because when I'm sat there in the barn working away in the background and somebody brings something in, you know, it's like listening to the story firsthand. So it's like permanent story time down there.
Oh, I love it. I have such a silly question that it's such a conservative question. Do you bring all your own gear, or is this stuff that's supplied?
Yeah, no, I have to bring everything down there myself. Things like my solvents, well, I get them to order them so that I don't have to transport them.
Yes,
I usually take my own stuff down, and so they now order the solvents. And we've got plenty of health and safety in place, and, you know, we've got the solvent cupboards and fire cupboards and things like that. So I keep the solvents down there, but things like my essentials are the hot spatula. Obviously, I have a toolbox with all my gubbins in. So I have, you know, nylon gossamer film and, you know, my filling tools and my beautiful Series 7 Winsor & Newton brushes and, you know, for retouching. I take my own pigments down there. I take my museum vac down there, compressor and spray unit, which is fairly compact, but that's a fairly, you know, bulky thing. So those kind of items I take down myself.
Do you feel like the show strikes a good balance between restoration and conservation, or that it explains the differences?
No.
That was very honest.
Not for me anyway, not for me. Although I have been banging on about it for such a long time, and I do talk to different people about, not in a preachy way, but in like, oh, I use this and it's so good. You know, it's great. And I think it'll really work on your, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah. And also I do bang on about, you know, less is more. Really do less. But I certainly now hear when contributors come in with their stuff, they'll say things now like, I don't want it to look brand new. So I think that's come from me, because it's like, it doesn't have to look brand new to be like they're good.
No, absolutely. I think that was the thing that I can't remember if it's in the later season's intros, but you know, the intro in the first season was like a woman marveling at, oh, it looks like new. And I was like, no.
There you go. So that's been a slow burn. But definitely people are picking up on that now. And they like sort of the less is more mantra. And also they like the idea of things not looking brand new. So yeah, I feel I've had a little bit of an influence on that.
Is there a lot that we don't get to see on screen?
Oh, masses. For every object that's on, because I can never keep up with how they're editing the show and putting different things together and chopping and changing things. Yeah. So if I'm on one of the shorter shows for sort of like 10 minutes, for every 10 minutes, you're talking about 2 days of filming, in terms of hours.
Gosh,
but
yeah.
it does go on over a week or 2 weeks, depending on what the object is. So, yeah, an awful lot of filming goes into every minute of the TV. So it's quite intense from that point of view.
What's been the trickiest thing about being part of a TV show like this?
Hanging around. There's a lot hanging around, waiting. Yeah, and the other thing is the environment of the place. It's at the Wealdon Downland Open Air Museum, which is just outside Chichester. It's absolutely fantastic place, and it's a real barn. It's a real late 18th century thatched roof barn, very beautiful. But the whole museum is in a dip in the landscape. Oh my word, it's so damp down there.
Oh.
Varnishing has been my most difficult aspect on the show. The dampness and also the dirt. It's pretty mucky in there. I mean, it's kept clean, but the very nature of the space and all the different people that are working in it is very dusty.
It's funny that you say that, because I visited the open air museum, you know, as a student, like 12 years ago or something, you know, a long time ago. I had this vivid memory of it just being kind of cold and damp. So as soon as I knew where it was, I was like, whoa, really? That's a choice. I mean, beautiful, but fascinated by the choice of location and stuff. And I thought there will be some practical difficulties with that for sure.
Oh, for sure. You wouldn't really want to workshop in a barn. And the barn is a barn. And it's not so much now, but in the early days before we were there, much of the time, it actually has a separate life, you know, as a sort of barn for the museum. And they have different types of workshops in there. But the interior of it is kitted out specifically for the show. We have a couple of great set designers, one of whom is Dom, who's on the show. He's the metal person expert who's outside, but he does all the signage for everything that's in the barn. He did the repair shop sign, very talented. But he and another lady who's a set designer, they do the kitting out of the barn.
It's so funny because me as a conservator and my other half as someone who's done a bit of filmmaking, we were both immediately like, that's going to be a nightmare to light, you know, both for filming and for working. You know, it's just like...
Well spotted. Well, initially the first year, if you look at some of the early programs, the first ones went out in 2017. And it looks to me, if you see anything from then, it looks to me like it was filmed in the 1970s. You know, it's really dark, really quite harsh lighting, and it was just odd. And now they have people in that specialise, and they've got the right lighting for it.
What's been the best thing about being on the show?
So I think the idea of change and welcoming that in your life, and this is an opportunity, and it's something that's been very different. I just think the challenge of it and doing something that's different, that's really good.
Do you have any advice for conservators who would maybe like to be involved with something like this or be on TV?
I mean, I would like to think that there are going to be more programs like this. I'd certainly like to get more of the technical history of objects out there. So I think there's sort of room for growth in that. And I would hope that within the television world, things like that are going to be happening. But if you don't like change and you don't like that kind of pressure, it's not for you. But in terms of, I suppose I'm pretty lucky that it just cropped up. I didn't go out hunting for it at all. I mean, I never anticipated it. It just happened that I was at the night of the private view at City and Guilds that it all kicked off. And then there was a long gap between that happening and then the repair shop coming up. So I don't know. I don't really have any specific advice other than to say it's not for the faint-hearted. I think you have to be fairly confident in what you do to be able to stand the pressure of it.
That's good advice in and of itself. I think that is helpful. Well, thank you so much for talking to the C Word today. I really enjoyed it.
It's been thrilling. Thanks, Jenny.
If you're enjoying the C Word and would like to support our work, then please consider becoming one of our patrons. For as little as $1 per month, you can help us keep our episodes online and more of them coming. Patreon helps us meet our regular costs for the show, and also to plan ahead so we know roughly how much of a monthly budget we've got. That's super helpful when you're trying to do something special like buy a better microphone or save up to go to a special event. Your support also helps keep us free of advertisement. In return, our supporters get access to our archive of extended episodes, which you can only access on our Patreon page. Yeah, for that $1 a month, you get a little extra audio enjoyment. We've crunched the numbers, and it's about 10% extra content on a regular basis. Well, that's not bad for less than a cup of coffee, eh? If supporting us sounds like something you'd like to do, then head over to patreon.com/thecword and join our bunch of absolute champions. Thanks for listening. We're The C Word, and you've been listening to Lucy Branch, Kloe Rumsey, and me, Jenna Mathiasson. Join us next time for an episode about... Actually, we're not quite sure. Don't worry though, there will be a next episode. In the meantime, check out our website at thecword.show, tweet us at @thecwordpodcast, or simply email us on thecwordpodcast@gmail.com. The intro and outro music is Spring by Didi Music, used under Creative Commons Attribution License. Additional music and sound effects by Callum Robertson. This has been a Wooden Dice production. This is the nature of podcasting from home.
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Also, my table makes this noise.
Ooh,
So I'm having to be really quiet.